So simply being born in the U.S. is clearly not enough to be an American citizen, since it doesn't apply to Native American Indians. Something more is required. And by the way, Native American Indians were subject to the criminal law of the U.S. If they murdered someone, they were subject to being tried in our criminal courts. So something more is required than simply being born in the U.S. and being subject to our judicial jurisdiction, and that is political jurisdiction. Note what they say here. These Indians who maintain their tribal relations, in other words, they have a political bond to a government, not the United States. That's what's key here. If you're ever compelled to use force in defense of yourself or your family, the good news is that if you defended lawfully, you can be very hard to convict. But did you defend lawfully? Because if you don't know where the actual legal boundaries for self-defense are, it's the easiest thing in the world to innocently step over them, and now you're extremely easy to convict. Good news. In just a single day, you can become an expert on the law of self-defense and make yourself extremely hard to convict. On Saturday, April 26th, I'm holding one of my only twice-a-year full-day Law of Self-Defense advanced classes. This class is taught live by me and live streamed to you. It teaches you everything you need to know in one day, and there's plenty of opportunity for personal Q&A with me as well. Even more good news, when you register today, you save yourself 50% off the standard registration, but that discount ends soon. Your 50% discount and many more details on this advanced class are available just by pointing your browser to lawofselfdefense.com/advanced today. And I'll also drop that link in the description. I look forward to seeing all of you there. One of the ones he signed immediately after being sworn in for his second term, protecting the meaning and value of American citizenship. And a lot of people, especially those on the left, argue that this means Trump is overturning birthright citizenship. In fact, birthright citizenship is simply not a thing. Trump's not overturning anything. He's simply acknowledging what the actual law is on so-called birthright citizenship. But of course, the reporting we get all looks like this nonsense from CNN, the communist news network. Make that a little bit bigger. And there they have a picture of Wong Kim Ark, who was a child of Chinese immigrants in a case that went to the Supreme Court in 1898. Completely misrepresented, of course, here by CNN. What does CNN have to say? And this was written right after the executive order came out on January 20th when Trump was sworn in. It's one of the many he signed that day after his swearing in. This news article came out just a few days later. And CNN writes, in the few days since he returned to the White House, President Donald Trump's sweeping executive orders have shattered political and legal norms. But one order is in a category of its own. His decree to end the constitutional promise of birthright citizenship contradicts the plain words of the 14th Amendment and would reverse an 1898 Supreme Court milestone case. That case was brought by the son of Chinese nationals, and it has long guaranteed citizenship for anyone born in the United States, unless the parents fall under such narrow exceptions as foreign diplomats or soldiers of invading armies. All a lie. All a lie. And by the way, the same court that they think supports, the same Supreme Court that in 1898 supported birthright citizenship, that's the same court that passed the Dred Scott case that said slaves could not be citizens. That one was reversed. This one should be reversed too. I think it's bad law, but in any case, it doesn't say what CNN says it says. Trump had also posted up on social media, the Fourth Amendment right of American citizenship never had anything to do with modern-day gate crashers, illegal immigrants who break the law by being in our country. It had everything to do with giving citizenship to former slaves. Our founding fathers are spinning in their graves at the idea that our country can be taken away from us. No nation in the world has anything like this. Our lawyers and judges have to be tough and protect America. So why do people get confused? People get confused about this notion of birthright citizenship because they're ill-informed and ignorant. I don't mean ignorant in a derogatory sense. I mean in a technical sense. They literally don't know what they're talking about. Here is that provision of the First Amendment, often referred to as the Birthright Clause of the 14th Amendment. And it reads, all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. And people look at that and they say, well, it says all persons born in the United States are citizens of the United States. Doesn't that settle it, Andrew? It's clear. It's in the plain language of the 14th Amendment. Except these same people forget about this part. And subject to the jurisdiction thereof. Or they simply misunderstand what it means. They think it means being subject to our criminal jurisdiction, for example. If you're in the US and you commit a crime, you commit a murder, obviously you're subject to the jurisdiction of our criminal courts. But that's true of everybody. Citizens, not citizens, born here, not born here. That speaking, that concept of being subject to our criminal jurisdiction is a particular form of jurisdiction. But that's not the form of jurisdiction being spoken of here. What's being spoken of here is political jurisdiction. Are you subject to the draft? Can you vote? Do you have to pay American taxes? Political jurisdiction, not simply judicial jurisdiction. And how do we know what this means? Well, first of all, it has to mean something other than simply being subject to the criminal courts, because of course you're subject to the criminal courts if you're in the US. Everybody is. And it has to be more than simply being physically present in the US, because everyone born in the US is obviously physically present upon immersion from their mom. So it needs something more, and it cannot just be ignored because the US Constitution and its amendments do not have extra words. Subject to the jurisdiction thereof has to mean something more than merely being physically present, like being born, or it would be redundant. And there's no redundant language in the Constitution or its amendments. Now, the good news is we know what's meant by subject to the jurisdiction thereof in the 14th Amendment, because the men who wrote and ratified the 14th Amendment told us so. They had extensive debates in the Senate about the 14th Amendment and this clause and the particular phrase, subject to the jurisdiction thereof. I've pulled a bunch of quotes from here because that's what the language means. When you do constitutional interpretation, the meaning of the words is the meaning they had when the nation adopted the Constitution or the amendment in question. Now, I'm not going to reference all these quotes to names because they're all senators that obviously are long dead. This 14th Amendment was ratified shortly after the Civil War, so obviously everyone here is dead. But take my word for it, these are all senators engaged in debate about this particular clause. What do they have to say? The amendment I've offered, the 14th Amendment, is simply declaratory of what I regard as the law of the land already, that every person born within the limits of the United States and subject to their jurisdiction is by virtue of natural law and national law a citizen of the United States. Okay? That same senator goes, but Indians born within the limits of the United States and who maintain their tribal relations are not, in the sense of this 14th Amendment, born subject to the jurisdiction of the U.S. So right away, he's talking about Native American Indians born in the U.S. They're not automatically American citizens. They've never actually been automatically American citizens under the 14th Amendment. They are American citizens under a statute that was adopted in 1925, but not under the 14th Amendment. So simply being born in the U.S. is clearly not enough to be an American citizen, since it doesn't apply to Native American Indians. Something more is required. And by the way, Native American Indians were subject to the criminal law of the U.S. If they murdered someone, they were subject to being tried in our criminal courts. So something more is required than simply being born in the U.S. and being subject to our judicial jurisdiction, and that is political jurisdiction. Note what they say here. These Indians who maintain their tribal relations, in other words, they have a political bond to a government, not the United States. That's what's key here. It's perfectly clear that the mere fact that a man is born in the country has not heretofore entitled him to the right to exercise political power. There's no political jurisdiction. Senator Trumbull, the provision is that all persons born in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens. That means subject to the complete jurisdiction. What do we mean by subject to the jurisdiction of the U.S.? Not owing allegiance to anybody else. That is what it means. So simply being born in the U.S. is not enough. And of course, we're speaking here of babies being born, but the babies don't automatically become U.S. citizens because they have the nationality of their parents. They have the foreign bond. Another senator, it cannot be said of any Indian who owes allegiance, partial allegiance, if you please, to some other government, that he is subject to the jurisdiction of the U.S. It is only those persons who come completely within our jurisdiction, who are subject to our laws, that we think of making citizens. I have already replied to the suggestion as to the Indians being subject to our jurisdiction. They are not subject to our jurisdiction in the sense of owing allegiance solely to the United States. They would not be embraced by this provision. Now, all that this 14th Amendment provides is that all persons born in the United States and not subject to some foreign power, for that, no doubt, is the meaning of the committee who have brought the matter before us, shall be considered as citizens in the United States. I concur entirely with the honorable senator from Illinois in holding that the word jurisdiction, as here employed, ought to be construed as to imply a full and complete jurisdiction on the part of the U.S. Certainly, gentlemen cannot contend that an Indian belonging to a tribe, although born within the limits of the U.S., is subject to the full and complete jurisdiction. That question has long since been adjudicated so far as the usage of the government is concerned. Another senator, in one sense, all persons born within the geographical limits of the U.S. are subject to the jurisdiction of the U.S., but they are not subject to the jurisdiction of the U.S. in every sense. Take the child of an ambassador. In one sense, that child born in the U.S. is subject to the jurisdiction of the U.S. because if that child commits the crime of murder or commits any other crime against the laws of the country, to a certain extent, he is subject to the jurisdiction of the U.S., but not in every respect. I understand the words here, subject to the jurisdiction of the U.S., to mean fully and completely subject to the jurisdiction of the U.S. So what was the 14th Amendment really about? What it was really about in the immediate aftermath of the Civil War is our nation had a bunch of just freed slaves. Those slaves had no nationality anywhere else. They would be stateless. So the 14th Amendment was intended to address that problem, providing American citizenship to the freed slaves who would otherwise be stateless, and they do not have any allegiance to any other government. That is who the 14th Amendment grants citizenship to. Senator Salisbury, I do not presume that anyone will pretend to disguise the fact that the object of this 14th Amendment section is simply to declare that freed slaves shall be citizens of the United States. That's the purpose. That is the only purpose. And my observations here, Trump is not overriding the 14th Amendment by executive order. The 14th Amendment refers to persons born in the U.S. and subject to the jurisdiction thereof. This means the complete and exclusive jurisdiction of the U.S., such that they would otherwise not be stateless as the former slaves would. Offspring born to foreign nationals are not stateless simply because the biological process of birth happens on U.S. soil. Such offspring possess the citizenship of their foreign national parents, just as offspring born to American citizens are themselves American citizens, even if born on foreign soil. The bottom line, the offspring born to foreign nationals are not automatically American citizens simply because they are birthed on American soil. They are citizens of their parents' nation. And this Wong Kim Ark character from this 1898 Supreme Court decision does not hold that anybody born on American soil is an American citizen. In fact, like any court decision, it's limited to the facts of the case before it. And Wong Kim Ark had not merely been born on American soil. His parents were not tourists in America. His Chinese parents were permanent resident aliens of the United States. They were never going to be citizens anywhere else but in the U.S. They had made that political commitment to the United States, and the United States had accepted that commitment by granting them permanent resident alien status. So all the Wong Kim Ark Supreme Court decision of 1898 says that if someone's born on American soil to permanent resident aliens, not illegal migrants, not tourists, not student visas, not work visas, to permanent resident aliens, the 1898 Supreme Court said their children born on American soil are American citizens. Now, frankly, I believe that's a bad decision. It's a bad ruling. The 14th Amendment does not say that. The 14th Amendment doesn't say anything about being born to permanent resident alien parents who still have citizenship in another country. So I think Wong Kim Ark is bad law, but even if it remains on the books, it still only applies to the children of permanent resident aliens, not people born in America generally becoming citizens. Thanks for watching this highlight segment of our full-length Law of Self-Defense live stream. If you enjoyed this content, make sure to give us a like and subscribe for more expert analysis on politics, law, and how to be hard to convict. And to watch the full-length episode of this show, just click right here. Stay safe.